Welcome to the Ogles channel. Thanks for watching today. Let's continue our journey through every Game Boy and Game Boy Color game. And today we're going to focus on a game called Balloon Kid. Now I never had Balloon Kid growing up, but evidently it's a sequel to a game called Balloon Fight, which I never had that game either, but I did play it in the arcade a little bit. And it was never like my favorite game to play. I think I played the versus one where you're trying to take out the other person's balloons. Never was my favorite arcade game, but regardless, Balloon Kid is a sequel to it and is a full-fledged adventure game based upon similar mechanics. But before we jump into that, I always like to take a look at the box art first. So as we look at it here, of course we have the title there, Balloon Kid, got balloons for the two O's, makes complete sense. We have Alice there, who's going to be our main protagonist for the adventure here, trying to rescue her brother Jim. And of course she's got her balloons, just like she does in the game. And there's this giant fish down there trying to, gulp her up. It always reminds me of the fish from Mario 3. Very similar to that, and actually very similar mechanic how it plays in the game, because you get close to the water, it jumps out and tries to grab you as well. And there's platforms with little flames on it, and there's a lot of flames you're going to avoid, even the sparks. I mean, this cover actually represents the game perfectly well. It's not one of those covers where it just sort of like pulls various things out of the air to make up. Everything on this cover is completely related to the game and the obstacles that you're going to go through. But let's go ahead and journey into the game. Now when you start the game up here, you got a pretty standard little title screen. You got the logo up top, and of course the two O's for the balloons. You got little smiley faces on them. They do their best to try to give a lot of the inanimate objects characters in the game. Like the trees are going to have little smiley faces on them. This has little smiley faces on it. I mean, there's a lot of little stuff like that hidden throughout the game. And of course you have three main game modes here. You have the one-player game, which is the main story for the game, the two-player versus, which I couldn't experiment with because it has to require a link cable and someone else to play with, and I didn't have that opportunity, but it's going to be very similar to what the arcade Balloon Fight is, from my understanding anyway. And then the third part down below, Balloon Trip, is just simply a high score to collect as many balloons as you can, just simply to get a high score. Now the one-player mode is definitely the story mode, because it even starts out basically telling you the story here. Jim's all proud of his balloons, and all of a sudden he gets caught up and his balloons take him off in the middle of nowhere, and his sister Alice here picks up some balloons, and off she goes to try to rescue her brother. It's a very simple intro. There's no main antagonist here. It's just simply, he got caught up in some wind, and he's going to leave all these balloons behind for Alice to try to gather and find him and rescue him. And there's a lot of little bad guys he's going to fight along the way. And there's just something about the music here and the little house here and the, the simplicity of American life between the two characters. It reminds me a little bit of the Mother games. I know the gameplay is totally different. I understand everything about the game is totally different. There's just something about the music and the aesthetic here, and I guess the tone that reminds me of the Mother games. I don't know, could just be me. But regardless, we start up stage 1 here, and our whole goal is just simply to travel from right to left, collecting as many balloons as we can, and to reach the end of the stage. Now you could actually travel the entire stage without collecting any balloons at all, but if you collect more balloons, you get things like extra lives, or you get power-ups, as far like star power, to knock out all the enemies, so there are some benefits to collecting the balloons along your journey. But as you're journeying through the sky here, it's not as easy as just simply reaching the exit, because you have these two little balloons above your head, and these little birds and these little obstacles, everything tries to attack your balloons, and if they burst one balloon, not a big deal. You can still continue to float. But if they burst both of your balloons, you're going to fall down. If you fall on the ground, you're in good shape, because you can just simply pump your balloons back up, head back up into the sky. But if they burst both of them when you're above the water, you fall into the water and you lose a life. Now the game does have a lot of checkpoints as you go, but once you lose all 5 of your lives, you have a game over and you only get one continue. And that's going to make it really difficult in the later levels. But we are talking about just stage 1 right here, and stage 1 is very easy, very simple. Avoid the few obstacles that are in the stage, collect some balloons, make it to the exit, and stage 1 is completely done. Now when you start the second level, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but for the most part, it's still pretty easy to navigate here. You have some pretty happy trees in the background. They remind me of the tree Wispy Winds from Kirby. I mean, because it's a tree with a personality, I guess. But as you're going through this little level here, there's little caterpillars, there's little bugs, there's little beetles, and they're all going to try to attack you as you're trying to reach the end and burst your balloons and make you fall into the water. But for the most part, this level is still pretty easy. I will say, just as a side note, the controls are a little floaty in this game, as in the best way I can describe it is if you're playing Mario 1 in an underwater level where you're swimming. The controls feel very similar to that, because when you're pressing A, you continue to go up. When you stop pressing A, you begin to sink a little bit. And it feels very floaty like that, except maybe a little bit more momentum in the direction that you're going. And so in these early levels, not a big deal, because the obstacles are pretty far apart, pretty easy to avoid. But they are a little bit on the floaty side, because it feels like you're underwater. But at the end of level 2, you do get to fight the first boss in the game, who's basically like a giant wolf here. And I couldn't figure out for the life of me how to even attack the wolf, because I would have my little balloons here. I try to float down, hit him on top of the head. It didn't do anything. I tried to get down close and release my balloons on him. That didn't do anything. I tried to release my balloons and like dive bomb and attack him. That didn't do anything, and it took me forever to figure out you actually have to release your balloons and then just simply jump on his head. I mean, like, how simple is that? But it's like my brain just didn't want to think about the correct way to do it. And I tried all these other strategies, but it was so simple when you figure it out. You just simply jump on his head, and after 3 jumps, he falls apart and dies. I mean, it's a really easy boss. Now the third stage is going to attempt to mix the scenery up a little bit more because you're no longer in a cityscape or in a forest. Now you're in a full island aesthetic here, complete with like little islands you go between, little parrots, little hummingbird imposters, little crabs, little squids, little fish. I mean, like, they really went for the full island aesthetic here, complete with little islanders in the background as well. And this level here is pretty much very similar to the last two. Most of the obstacles are pretty easy to avoid, but there are some spots in this level where you have to actually time out when you want to refill your balloons and when is the appropriate time to refill it, because if you try to do it in the wrong areas, you're going to fall into the water and dying from that or getting hit by an enemy. And so the strategy begins to come into stage 3 here. It's not like full blown or anything, but you're actually realizing that there's more to this game, just simply collecting balloons and journeying to the end. There's going to be some strategy and annoyance involved. Now, when you reach the close of the level, there's actually not going to be a boss to battle against here, but there is a giant whale who's got his mouth open. You have to basically travel into the belly of the whale, and that's going to lead us into stage 4. Now, stage 4 mixes it up by not only being a different scenery because you're in the belly of the whale, but also having obstacles at the top of the screen and at the bottom of the screen. Because at the top of the screen, you have the ribs of the whale coming down, which, of course, if you hit your balloon on it, it's going to burst. And if you fall down into the water, that also kills you. So it's sort of a dangerous territory on each side of the screen. And, of course, as you're journeying through the level, they have little fish that are going to pop out of the water. They almost look like bonefish, which I guess makes sense because you're in the belly of the whale. It's probably a dead fish. And little octopus that are going to come out of the water as well. I mean, there's a lot of little obstacles. This level here is not too bad, except for having to get used to obstacles at the top of the screen and the bottom of the screen. But when you do get to the final boss of this one, it's like a swordfish. And a swordfish is the same mechanic as the last one. You let your balloons go and you simply hop on his head a few times, and I think it's 3 times for him as well. And every time you hop on his head, it just bounces you to the other side of the screen. And really easy boss. And I have to say that overall for the game so far anyway, it's been a fairly relaxing experience, just simply traveling through, collecting balloons, avoiding a few obstacles, taking out the bosses, and it's been a enjoyable experience, and I like the game thus far. But then you hit stage 5, and holy cow, it's like it's a totally different game as far as like difficult wise. It's like you've hit a brick wall that you cannot pass through, because at this point I went in with multiple lives. I had more lives than I even had when I started the game because I had collected some extra lives throughout. But when I got into this level, there are so many obstacles coming through here. You got waterfalls to push you down. You got little clouds with little lightning strikes that are coming out of it. You have little static electricity balls or little static balls when you hit those. And all of these are just simply instant dying as soon as you hit them, except for the waterfalls, and they just push you straight down to the water. But there's so many obstacles that are just instant death in this level that is extraordinarily hard to get through. I lost every single life in this one level before I even got to the end of it. And I had to do a continue, and you only get one continue. I went through the entire level again, or tried to go through the level. I lost every life again trying to go through the level. And so I'm out of continues. I had to restart the game and journey all the way back through it to get to this level. And just by chance on the 4th try on this level, 4 tries to beat this one level, I was finally able to make it through it, and it is an extraordinarily hard one to get through because your controls are fairly floaty, and trying to avoid all of these obstacles is just ridiculous. I mean, this game is significantly harder from this point on, and this is the easiest of the last 4 levels. And then comes along stage 6, and it's an ice level, and I generally love ice levels, but this ice level, it does something I absolutely hate in games, and it puts these impossible obstacles in front of you that you cannot figure out the first time, the second time, maybe even the 10th time how to get by it, and you die every single time because the screen continues to move whether you're moving or not. So there's like a time limit on every one of these levels. And of course, there's this one part here. You get through all the penguins, which weren't too bad. You hop over the little flames. They're not too bad. And then you get to this part. And I didn't know what to do because they got this little platform out here that if you run out there and you're just going to fall down on you. So I try to get out there. I try to pump up some balloons real fast. Can't get my balloons pumped up. And then you end up falling into the water because you don't last long enough. And then I try to hop on the little icicles that are falling down. Maybe make like a little island I can hop on. That's not possible either. So then I just try to wait for the screen to run out. Maybe there's like something I don't see that's going to happen. I don't understand that either. And it takes me forever. And I lose so many lives at this. And I've resorted to something that I don't generally like to do in games. I had to start using save states because up to this point, I was like, I'm going to have to go through the entire 20, 30 minutes of the game to get here again and lose all of my lives trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do at this point. And finally, after like 20 minutes, I figured it out. If you wait till the screen scrolls almost all the way to the end, then you can do a long jump and you just simply jump over the massive gap here. And holy cow, who's going to figure that out? Especially like on their first time. You could have multiple continues, or I'm sorry, multiple game overs and try to work your way back up to this. You could spend hours and hours before you actually figured out this long jump part. And then you come to a second one here, very similar aesthetic, and you're like, I'm not sure how to get over this. And so, you take your time, you finally figure out, you just take a small jump over it, you stand there for a second because you're like, finally, I made it, and then a walrus just walks out from the side of the screen that you can't see and just kills you immediately. And it's like, how would you know that unless you've been here before? And it's just, I don't like when games set you up for traps like that you cannot avoid unless you played the level before in advance. And that's exactly what this level does and all the rest of the levels in the game. They set you up with so many traps that you cannot have known about unless you've played the games multiple times through and just memorized the levels. And so this level here, it really does begin to ruin the game a little bit, because it's like you cannot just simply journey through it and figure it out. You're going to have tried it multiple times to know exactly where all these little obstacles are going to be, all these little enemies are going to be, all these little puzzles are going to be, and it's a really, really annoying level. And then you get to the boss of the level, and you can finally let out sort of a sigh of relief, because the boss here, despite the level being insanely hard, the boss is really, really simple. It's a little snowman here. You got sunglasses. He's looking pretty cool, and no pun intended. And he throws his hat off his head. And when he throws his hat off his head, that's when you can jump on his head. And you just have to do it 3 times, and it's really easy to avoid the hat. It's really easy to jump on his head, and super simple boss. And like all the bosses in the game are super easy. No matter how hard the levels get in the game, the boss is consistently always easy. And then we head on into level 7 here, and level 7 continues the same winter aesthetic as level 6, but instead of being outside in a snow level, now we're inside of an ice cavern or an ice cave here, equipped with little, stalactites and stalagmites and little ice spiders on the wall. I mean, it's a really cool looking level, and aesthetically, it's probably my favorite level in the game. However, the difficulty is definitely on par with the last level. There's no spots where it's like you had no idea what to do, as far as, like I have no idea how to even conquer this particular area. But there's so many like tight fit areas you have to go through. There's so many enemies that you don't expect to be there. There's so many opportunities to have one-shot kills on you that this level is just as difficult as the last one. And I'd be genuinely surprised if anybody ever made it through this level on your first try. I would say it's going to take you at least probably 10 or 15 tries to actually make it through this level in order to head on into level 8. And level 8 really tries to do the opposite as far as scenery of level 6 and 7, and instead of doing like a snow scene, now we're in a burning hell. I mean, there's flames jumping out everywhere, fire pits all around, conveyor belts leading you to the fire pits. I mean, there's a lot of things that represent sort of a hellscape as you're journeying through this particular level. But it starts off right at the beginning, because I mean, there's these giant flames that jump up into the air, and the ceiling is so low that you actually journey to the ceiling, hit the ceiling, and just ricochet straight into the flame. And that's annoying. Then you hit these conveyor belts, and if you wait too long, you get stuck on the side of the conveyor belt, and there's nowhere to go, and you simply have to wait it out until you die, being pushed into these little gear shaft over here. A very violent death for your character. But of course, as you journey through, there's little flame cans that shoot out little sparks as you're trying to get through that. There's a little bed of fires as you try to jump over, go through. There's all kinds of horrible obstacles to get through in this level. And just like in the last level, I cannot imagine anyone ever getting through this level within their first or second try. And I would say probably 10 or 15 tries just to get through the level. I have a strong distaste for the entire last half of this game, because they really did do their best to make it where no players could get through it on their first time, and you pretty much have to have the game memorized just to make it through. And even if you did have it memorized, if you make one small mistake because the controller is so floaty, you're going to end up dying anyway. So this is an extraordinarily difficult part of the game. But then when you get to the final boss here, there's a little robot which sort of comes out of nowhere. Like, why is this robot associated with this particular level? But of course, he shoots out little sparks from his mouth, and if you just stand off to the right side and you just wait for the sparks to go up, hop on his head, sparks disappear, and he can't hit you by walking into you, so you just simply stay on the far right side of the screen, wait for him to shoot the sparks out, hop on his head. So once again, a super easy boss fight. I don't understand a game that makes like super hard levels and then just makes these piece of a cake boss fights. But that's exactly what this game did here. But regardless, you've now rescued your little brother, and of course you've got your balloons, and you start heading back home, and the credits begin to roll as you're traveling across this little ocean scene with your balloons. And it's a nice little peaceful scene until a hummingbird shows up and pops the balloon and knocks the little brother out of your arms, and he falls into the ocean. And so even the ending for this game is a horrible ending, because like, you did all of this journey, you went through all these obstacles to rescue your little brother, and now he's just going to fall into the ocean and die. I mean, what a depressing ending for a game. It's almost like the developers just want to get one last little jab at you before you could actually turn your game off. But overall, I can't say I'm a huge fan of Balloon Kid. I mean, the first half of the game was pretty enjoyable. The music was pretty good. The graphics are fine in it. The controls were a little bit floaty, but it was a fairly relaxing game. You're sort of journeying through, collecting balloons, avoiding a few obstacles, fighting some easy bosses. It was an enjoyable game. But then the second half of the game rolled around and it just like ruined everything you enjoyed about the first half of the game. It wasn't relaxing anymore. You were just frustrated all the time as you were journeying through it because you were just simply trapped constantly, or you were tricked as far as like going into a little area and an enemy just pops out and kills you. Or you journey into a little area and you didn't move fast enough and so now you die in that spot. Or you journey into an area and there's a little gap there, you don't know how to jump across and you're going to die multiple times just trying to figure it out and it's going to give you a game over. I feel sorry for kids who played this game back in like the actual 90s that had no way of like saving their game or maybe like a Game Genie to skip to certain levels, because the frustration of making it all the way to like level 5 or 6 or 7 and then getting to a spot where you genuinely couldn't figure it out unless you tried it multiple times in a row and you simply have to die, game over, play through all those levels again, try it 2 or 3 more times, game over, play it all over again. It would take an eternity. And I would actually like to know like how many players beat this game way back in the day without any help or anything, because I mean you are truly a legendary player to have beaten Balloon Kid. But like I said, there are a few good aspects. If you could just take the first half of the game, the scenery, the characters, the charm, the music, I mean there's a lot of benefits to the game. It just really dropped the ball in the second half, in my opinion anyway. But what do you all think? Have you played Balloon Kid? Did you like the game? Did you hate the game? Let me know in the comments down below. And if there's a Game Boy game you want me to journey through sooner than later, let me know that in the comments down below as well, and I'll work it into the schedule as we're journeying through all these games. I mean, we'll get to all of them eventually, but if you want it sooner than later, let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out other videos listed up above, and as always, go out there, find a great game to play. Just simply have a great rest of the day.